Welcome to Paradigm Playbook, the podcast on the business of sports. With 50 plus years of experience, Steve Cook shares insights weekly, featuring top playmakers shaping the industry. Get ready to script your next play. Now, here's your host.
Hello and welcome to Paradigm Playbook. I'm your host, Steve Cook, along with Britt Kleine. Britt's the COO of Dominique, Dawes, Gymnastics and Ninja Academy. And I met Brit in trying to help a little bit with max capacity, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And if you're a follower of Paradigm Playbook, we replayed last week the Dominique Dawes interview. So everybody can go back, and if you haven't seen that, go back and take a look at that. Dominique was a great guest, but that's who Brit is working with now. So Brit, let's have you introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I've been with Dominique Dawes Gymnastics and Ninja Academy since September of 2024, so still relatively new. I am a dual Canadian-American citizen, so you might hear some fun little accent slang come out there. I recently made the move to DDGNA. We'll do the short term from City Fitness. I spent many years in the health and wellness industry, more on the gym physical fitness side. Prior to that, I worked with Special Olympics, running the program in the Philadelphia area for over 4 years. Back in Canada, doing lots of fun stuff with athletics. But I'm a bit of a career nerd. I just really love to work. I love my family, my dogs. I'm really excited to be here.
I've been about 6 months working with Dominique Dawes Academy and learning a lot. But before we dig into some of the challenges of that, I always like to start here. Tell me who Brit was in high school. What was the personality? I try to connect personality to career, but we'll see if I can.
High school was, I guess, like Brit 2.0. And I'm probably going to like loop in a little bit even before that. But I was a really quiet kid. Through grade school, if you looked at me, I would cry. Didn't have a lot of friends, was bullied pretty badly. My parents put me into sports, and I really started to kind of find, my voice, figure out who I was, get confidence, all of those things. And in high school, I sort of had this like moment of, you know what, this is who I am, and I'm just going to embrace it and go for gold, so to speak. And I really just started to embrace all the different aspects of me. I was definitely a jock, definitely an athlete. Still around the time frame that I was in high school, the type of sports I played weren't necessarily considered like feminine, so there was a whole challenge to that. I wasn't a super nerd, but I really took school seriously. I went to a private school, was very focused on college. I was a prefect, and for anybody who doesn't know what a prefect is, when you think about like Harry Potter, those like students who were like the leader students, I was one of those with like the special colored tie. But yeah, high school was a pretty defining time, just putting everything together and really just embracing this very bold and unique personality that's me.
Speaking of bold, let's circle back one more time and tell them your sport of choice.
In Canada, I'm an ice sports person. I grew up actually not playing ice hockey. I did play ice hockey as well, but there's a sport that's very popular in Canada, less so in the States, especially now, but it's called ringette. It's on ice. It's a similar concept to ice hockey, 5-on-5. If you look at it really quickly, you'll actually think it's hockey. It's not until you get into like the rules and like really see some of the nuances. There's no like blade on the end of the stick. It's a straight stick. There's a hole in the middle of the puck. So it's unique, but I've been playing that for, oh my goodness, like well over 34 years. But yeah, started playing when I was pretty young, and I was fortunate enough to actually play for Team USA. Our sport is not in the Olympics. When I was playing a lot, it was only females. But yeah, I've competed at 4 world championships. I was the captain for all 4 of those. Since I moved to the States 13 years ago, because ringette is not as accessible in the off season when we weren't, when it wasn't the cycle for worlds, I play a lot of ice hockey, and I still attempt to get out there, but it's definitely more on the recreational fun side these days versus the competitive.
We'll get into the Dominique Dawes side, but at Philly Sport, so what was your role there? What were you managing? An area, department? What was that?
Sure. So it was City Fitness in Philadelphia. I started with them as the vice president of sales. And when I left with them, and I was there for 7 years, senior vice president of operations, but we grew significantly. We had about 150 staff when I started, maybe 11,000 members. And when I left, we had, over 450 staff, over 22,000 members, 8 facilities and growing, considering the major loss that we took through COVID. But
wow. And so that was basically a membership-based program. It's interesting to me, the number of people that learned sales through major fitness chains. I don't know if you're aware of Patrick Bet-David, but one of my favorite podcasters, he runs Valuetainment. He started as a sales guy for, I forget, it was in California. I'm not sure whether it was LA Fitness or Gold's Gym or one of the, but he started that in sales, and it's pretty hardcore sales and selling.
Yeah, the gym industry, it does have a bit of a bad rap. It's got that very like people go in assuming it's kind of the used car lot where, you're lying to me, it's fees. And I actually so I grew up in a family very business focused. My dad was an entrepreneur, owned a couple businesses, a couple were like international, but like I learned sales from a very, very young age. It was just a part of what I did. I started working when I was 12 years old, helped out at a jewelry store in sales, and like sales was just sort of my thing. I did work part-time in a few gyms as well because I was an athlete and I liked the free gym membership. So that's when I was kind of exposed to exactly what you're saying, right? And it is pretty common. I think it's a pretty easy way to get your foot in the door for a first job, whether you're at the front desk and you're responsible for some selling or you have a more serious sales job. But it can certainly be hardcore. One of the things I loved about what I did at City Fitness and why I was so open to the job was the owner, Ken, he really gave me sort of creative freedom, if you will, to redefine how we did sales at City Fitness. And I wanted it to be very like open, clear, understanding. I think we were one of the first gyms where I moved our online cancellation to an online form. Just click a button. If you want to be out of your gym contract, you can. No more certified mail, etc. So that is definitely the typical way. I think a lot of folks in the sales world, at least one point in time, have probably dabbled in gym sales for sure.
Yeah. Another guy, Alex Hormozy, is another one. He's acquisition.com, but he came from the gym industry. And he had that model too, where, you want out, you're out. It's one click out. It's a little bit different in the gymnastics world where we're dealing primarily with children. We're dealing with the parents of children. Yeah. So you have to be able to attract the children with the activities and then sell the parents based on the value. I think to me, it seems a little bit different than fitness sales when the kids get about.
So, just on that, so certainly it is a little different, right? Like any sales, what's my product and who's my target? But other than that, the process is relatively the same. You want to provide value, right? There's a cost to it and you need to provide value. It's got to be a quality product. That's part of the value, but what else is there? This day and age, it's not just the physical, either product or the service, right? Just because it's a good gymnastics lesson doesn't mean that there's still value there, right? So it's community, it's other benefits and things of that nature. So I think when you look at the core of what sales is and how we are redefining sales, at least at DDGNA, it's really not that different, but it is, to your point, a focus and a shift in focus on like, well, what is important to the buyer in this situation? It's not just one individual. I've got to kind of sell to an entire family, and there's different facets that are key in that.
I remember when I originally went into sales and I was on a different side of it. I was actually selling physical products, gym equipment, and there was everybody kind of looked down on salespeople a little bit, and there was this stigma. Every sales guy on TV wore a plaid jacket and was fast talker, and he lied. And, it's like the old Herb Barlick from WKRP in Cincinnati was the example. I always was able to fall back on, but if you believe in what you're selling, the difficulty is not selling. It's not, it's like, if I don't expose, and so I have this love for gymnastics too, and Brit knows that I grew up in gymnastics, and I firmly believe that the world's a better place if every kid did gymnastics. They don't have to become an Olympian like Dom. And Dom said that in the interview. It's not about becoming a champion. It's not about the medals and the trophies. Obviously, she did that at the highest level, but your academy is more about the participation of the kids and all those intrinsic benefits that they're getting. And I've heard you talk about that. I've heard the good news is I hear the same thing from all of your directors. Let's shift over and talk about entering this world. You said it's like less than a year, I guess, you're into this, and you get handed a pretty big job. At the time, you came when there was 2 gyms or 3?
I came when there's 2, and then 3 weeks in my tenure, if you will, we opened number 3.
And just so everybody knows, this is a growing organization, and 3 is soon to be 4. And when 4 becomes 4, it'll become 5. So it's a growing organization, and Dominique is still the face of the organization, and her principles are embedded in everything they do, but there's a full team in place now that's running this. Dom's not running the day-to-day. That's what's been given to Britt. So at this point, you walk into two clubs and you're about to launch the third one. I want to try to identify the biggest challenge, whether it's the people, the place, the timing, the schedule, the process. Can you put your finger on what appeared to be the biggest challenge at that time?
It's a great question. And I think, you obviously have owned companies, you own companies, have had like a lot of high positions. I don't think it's as easy, right, as saying there's a single thing. I think the biggest challenge is that there were a number of things between the people, the lack of systems, the processes, the way that we were selling. Like it was all a major project, especially because, just to elaborate a little bit more, Steve, we're going not just from 3 to 4, but like we have a goal of getting to 50 gyms in the next 4.5 years. So it's not like a gradual build and we can get things done as we want. It's when I came in, I don't even have time to put my feet on the ground. I've just got to start running. The one thing that I think was just great, and it really gave us a place to build from, was, to what you said, that Dominique's values were just so clear and in each person who was there. And even if we had some work to do and I needed to refine some things and restructure the business and make sure they understood some of those details, when I can lead with what really is the core of our product and our service, which are those values of really providing an inclusive space where kids of all backgrounds, of all goals, right, in whether they want to, try to be competitive down the road or just want to, get a little exercise in, where they're all able to come in a healthy and in a positive space that really kind of feeds to the whole child. And because everybody, whether it was one of my remote customer service agents or, any of our folks at the gym, because everybody was so bought into that, that's what made all of the other crazy challenges feasible. But it wasn't a single thing. There was a ton of things right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think, and other guests have mentioned this, that what you find is if you set out to, let's say we're gonna adjust the process, and it's something as simple as, how do we register the kids into the program? Well, and there's a way to do that. And in so setting that process, you find, we got the wrong tech system. So we've got to fix that. And then you realize, okay, but we don't have the right person to run that. So process leads to people. Everything starts with the core values, which you're running on. And that's the beauty of gymnastics. I deal with many people that are interested in opening a gymnastic club. It's easy to do it wrong, but it's really hard to screw it up totally. I mean, it's hard to fail at this because it is such a good thing for kids and it is so needed. Looking into the future in multiple locations, let me clarify a couple things first. Multiple locations, are you moving staff from location to location, or the staff dedicated to one location?
One of the things that we had to do was like shift the organizational structure, both to feed the current model, right? Like what are our existing stores? What are the existing need? But then also we have to keep in mind like scalability and knowing that, hey, if I've got 4 more locations coming online towards the end of this year and the beginning of next year, I need to already be, 6-7 steps ahead. So we have introduced a couple of layers. Before it was just kind of your location staff, and then we had one individual that kind of helped coordinate between the different gyms. We have introduced a director level. The director level serves all locations for their main realm. So I have a director of operations, we have a director of training and certification, and then I have a director of team who does our Excel team. We also have a director of HR now. So there's several others that we need, but right now for the purpose that we have to fill, those are the 4 that we have. Then I have the gym level. And for the most part, with the exception of a couple coaches that will coach at multiple locations, which is minimal, most of our staff are dedicated and committed to their individual locations.
The staff that is moving to locations, are they more a team level coach that needs more gymnastics experience?
Some of them are, and some of them are just willing to pick up more shifts, and they're willing to drive 15-20 minutes in between a couple of our locations. So for the most part though, yes, they are our team coaches, where we're kind of trying to figure out that program, and they do need to shift around, because I am learning that finding experienced gymnastics coaches is definitely a fun challenge.
One of the challenges that we found, and Brit's come well aware of, in many years prior to Brit entering the world of gymnastics, a lot of the coaches came out of men's collegiate gymnastics programs, a diminishing program right now. Unfortunately, the number of NCAA men's programs is down. There's still a lot of club programs. It's hard to find those people. So one of the challenges, and this is something that we've talked about, there's a concept, and even this is done in the educational world now, the concept to build your own. You hire the person and turn them into a good coach. Before I get bad emails, and I realize that you can't just take anybody and overnight teach them gymnastics, but you can take people and teach them how to work with children. So I guess that's more the concept than the gymnastics.
Yeah, I think it's a relatively timely conversation. So I just had my leadership team, actually all of our full-time staff, we just did a little book club and we did the ideal team player. And basically, long story short, it talks about these 3 virtues. And while I love the 3 virtues of the book, it's hungry, humble, and smart. Every location, whatever, this business can have our own virtues. But if you can find the person that has those virtues or abilities, then you can teach them the other stuff, right? Like you can more or less teach them the hard skills. Now, I think to your point about gymnastics, it certainly isn't that simple, but if I can find a younger or more green individual who, whether they were a gymnast or recently have a passion for it, and there are some coaches who are really great at being a coach and I was never a gymnast, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But if I can pick up those 2 or 3 non-negotiables that we as a company decide, like these are our virtues, then I can work with you and develop you to grow you. And that is something that we literally just had a conversation about. The director of team called me the other day, like, so how do you think we can actually grow people internally then? And I'm like, there we go. That's the question. But we do have to get creative because, I'm learning that people are very loyal to their home clubs. But to your point, I don't know if there's as many people out there who want to be coaches or who even know there's a career in gymnastics beyond competition.
The breeding grounds for good club coaches used to come from the world of physical education, and public school physical education teachers were not highly paid. So many of us, I being one of them, came from that world as a physical education teacher. In that business, you're taught how to train skills. And it's interesting. I'll never forget one class I had. You walk into class and they pick randomly someone from the class and said, okay, today you're teaching field hockey, no equipment. Now you're going to really lean on the skills of relation and communications and all that. And so I think in your case, if you can hire the character person and align with the core values, then you'll get through the rest of that and training them. And whether they're ever up to coaching the Excel level at DDGNA is less kids than the rec level. And well, let's be clear. Tell everybody the programs you have.
So we offer junior gymnastics. We have recreational gymnastics. We offer a ninja program as well. And then we have team and specifically Excel. And I think we've got, everything from pre-team up to, we had a couple sapphires, but I think they've since moved on. But like Dominique's original vision was strictly recreational. Now we only opened in 2020, so we haven't been around that long. We're just concluding our 2nd season with team. But to your point, Steve, that's sort of an add-on, but has not been and we don't believe will be like our main bread and butter. That's sort of an add-on piece that, providing we can accommodate with space and not take too much away from the recreational. We do believe that like you can still have fun and have a very positive experience, but still be competitive. So we like to have that option for some of our students, but we only have about 70 athletes right now in our Excel program across our locations.
They also have very large preschools. All of the gyms have dedicated space for preschool. Rec gymnastics and team kind of share a space, and then ninja and preschool. So one of the challenges of growth, I would think that that's difficult in finding new facilities, or no?
Well, the thing is, right, so these 3 locations that we have were all found by Dominique, and it really was, obviously find the real estate, find something price point that works, and then like you kind of make it work. Future gyms, we have a bit more of a blueprint, if you will. We have sort of a cookie cutter that we're going for. So we are looking for very similar spaces, structures, ceilings, all of that kind of stuff. But I would imagine that as of gym 6, 7, you'll probably start to see a very similar flow, structure, all of that kind of stuff once we really get our feet planted.
Yeah, I'm hearing more of that discussion even now as we're talking about Gym 4. You know, part of the reason I'm involved is when Dom first came to me, it was a discussion over this concept of max capacity and looking at each of the facilities and saying, okay, what are the max number of children we can have in here in any given hour? And how do we provide them with the best experience without leaving space unused? So that, again, the goal is that everybody should have a gymnastics experience. We have to do our share to get as many as we can. 50 facilities sounds almost unbearable to most people, but there's room in the country for that. I mean, so it's not like we're overstuffing a segment that doesn't need it. You know, we need more, and all those preschools need to learn how to tumble and fall down. So it's awesome. I want to understand the challenges of staff training. So hiring is one thing. So it's always obtain, train, and retain. You have to train them so that they get enough, but it has to be a friendly enough environment so that you don't have a churn within your staff. Where do you find the challenges of actually training them? Is it finding a trainer, or is it actually the process and scheduling of training?
I think it's a combination of those things, but right now, in terms of where we are, it's developing the training and making sure that it's consistent. People would basically get scheduled, you go in, you'd meet with your manager, depending on when you were there, you'd maybe shadow that coach or that coach. Hopefully they were a relatively strong coach, but I don't really know or have confidence in that. And there was no, list or checklist on what you were supposed to teach or anything. And a lot of the times they were also just getting thrown right into like, this is your job, you're a coach. No introduction to the company culture, to why we're here, to the importance of the business. So the biggest challenge right now has been and continues to be building out that kind of onboarding process and curriculum. What is important for them to be introduced to learn? What is the adequate training time to make sure that they have enough experience and get enough reps in? What should they be able to do before I give them the okay to take on a class? So we're building that out right now. That's kind of where the director of training and certification came in. And we're kind of figuring out our own, levels that we'll have internally. And that will also allow for a coach like moving up in the company or going for a raise. There'll be another layer of training they could do. The other layers that are challenging to that, of course, is, we're dealing with a lot of high school kids, a lot of young adults. The relationship with work is very different these days. I've been listening to quite a few things, and it's so interesting. I saw this one thing this morning and talked about like 3 generations ago was basically like survival, right? So you took whatever job, you were there as long as possible because you just wanted to survive. Then you had the group who they wanted to just kind of figure out like a standard of living. And now this group is just social. They want quality of life and all of these things. So for me to now tell, a 17 or an 18, 19-year-old kid, young adult, come in, you need to train, I really have to make sure that I'm hiring the right person who has the buy-in and understands why we're here. It's not just a paycheck. So there are certainly challenges with making sure that we bring the right people through the door and that the training is engaging enough and really kind of connects the dots. It's an ongoing process, but I really think it just comes down to like a consistent curriculum.
That's probably a challenge that everybody in today's society is struggling with, that the people that, want remote work and, obviously some of the things that don't apply to what you're doing. And I think it used to be much more traumatic when you left a job, whether you were fired or you quit or whatever, it was traumatic. And now it's, well, that's what I did last week. So it's a little.
Absolutely. People, there's something that they don't like. I'm out, see you later. So it's about building like that community and culture to hopefully build a bit of loyalty, which is not very common these days.
So I want to wrap this up with one last question. So there are a lot of gym owners that listen to the podcast around specifics of gymnastic clubs or swim schools. So going into from one location to 2, what's your advice on the mindset of that?
There's a few things. So I think the one thing, and I have not been involved in swim schools, but I think I see this in any industry, and I've been in a couple industries, but I think my first piece of advice is like, don't box yourself into whatever your industry norm is. You know, I hear a lot right now, well, other gyms don't do this or other gymnastics don't do this. I don't necessarily care. Now I want to be sure that I'm listening and I'm open to that. Are there lessons already learned? But sometimes you need to push the envelope a bit, especially if you want to grow and do something that someone else hasn't done. So just don't get too confined in whatever the space is that you're in. The other piece is, I think in general, whether you know you want to grow, whether it's by 1 gym, 3 gyms, 5 gyms, locations, whatever you call it, or you don't know you want to grow, I always encourage folks to always think in a scalable fashion. Even when I was working with City Fitness or Special Olympics, and it wasn't necessarily front of mind to grow like crazy, everything needed to be scalable. We wanted to make things that weren't necessarily manual, that didn't require a person to physically be there all the time. What happens if you're the owner and for some reason you have to be away for a month? How can you ensure that those processes can still run, your business can still run without you being worried or concerned? And I think that's the same when you're looking to grow. So anything you're doing now, take the time to think a few steps ahead. Is this something that if I was at 3 gyms, could it still work? If I was at 4 locations, would this still work? If I went on a 3-week vacation, could it still function without me? And do everything you can to build those systems, those processes, those automations now, so that it's easier when you are ready to grow and move.
You just use a term that's not normally used in the gymnastics industry, and that's 3-week vacation.
You know, we can dream, right? We can dream.
But I think you're right. That's what you have to shoot for. Okay, so just to wrap this up, if anybody would like to get in touch with you, send you an email or congratulate you on your success or anything like that, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
You can shoot me an email. It's Brit, BRITT, at DDGNA.com.
Brit is one of those that tracks your email and responds very quickly. So I know that for a fact. I appreciate that. Anything else you'd like to give to the audience before we sign off here?
I wish I had some really cool words of wisdom for a sign off, but I don't. It's been a pleasure. I'm excited to be a part of the industry and just keep learning. It's good stuff.
Very good. Thank you, Britt. I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for tuning in to Paradigm Playbook. Explore more at paradigmplaybook.com. Want to be a playmaker? Contact stephenjcook.com. Share this episode to spread the word about sports industry opportunities. See you next week.